None of us can just operate alone
Yeah.
as much as we'd like to. I mean, you can DoorDash, you can Instacart. It's a lot of stuff that you can do all by yourself in isolation. But to have the best quality of life, we are meant to be social creatures and we have to interact with others. And so we do have to get back out into society. And so finding the right community to be a part of is really essential in that healing process.
Welcome to Impostrix Podcast Season 4. My name is Whitney and I am your host. Thanks for joining us for this episode. I am excited to jump into it. Impostrix Podcast validates professionals of color navigating imposter experiences and racial toxicity within their careers. And this season, we are focusing exclusively on pouring into Black women. How can we take care of the Black women in our lives? If we are a Black woman, how can we pour into ourselves? How can we receive the pour from others? So this episode is going to be about that and all the episodes within this season. So sit back, get your listening ears on. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Impostrix Podcast Season 4. I am here with Dominique. Am I saying that right, Dominique?
You are. It is Dominique.
I was like, I should have asked her this beforehand. I am here with Dominique, and we are going to be talking about workplace trauma and how we are healing from workplace trauma. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I met Dominique, or kind of we crossed paths because we were both following Dr. Kara Yazid, who is I don't even know what all the titles that she goes by. But I was following her because she is a Black woman who is very open and very vulnerable and very honest publicly about all of the different challenges and struggles that she has experienced as she is going through them as a Black woman. Um, and I think I've found her maybe a year and a half ago, right after her son passed away. And she was posting on LinkedIn just how like insane it is, basically, that she was without a son now, suddenly, a
Yeah.
young son. Um, and just what it's been like and how she's been navigating the different employers dealing with her personality or firing her or whatever. And anyways, she started a certification, there we go,
Yeah.
around training people how to support Black women specifically with workplace trauma. And so I went to that information session and connected with some of the people there. Was not able to go through the certification, but Dominique did. And so I'm going to let Dominique talk a little bit about that because I think for folks who are dealing with workplace trauma, who are looking for support, Dominique may be a great resource for you. So I'll let her talk about that. But first, also, let me get into who Dominique is. Um, so she is a compassionate and dedicated life coach specializing in trauma-informed coaching, workplace wellness, and personal growth. She has a background in people operations, recruitment, and business operations. And so she is able to help individuals overcome workplace trauma, build self-connection, and achieve their full potential. And able to really bring that HR background into this like trauma, workplace trauma passion that she has. She draws from her own experiences with workplace bullying and trauma, and provides empathetic, intuitive guidance tailored to each person's needs. Welcome to the show, Dominique.
Thank you, Whitney, and thank you so much for having me. And glad we're able to have this important conversation today. And like you said, yeah, it was about a year and a half ago now that we connected after attending that webinar with Dr. Carey. I'd actually been following her before her son's passing, just trying to make sense of some of my own experiences in the workplace, and ended up stumbling across some of her work and her workbook that she has, Unbreak My Soul, which is kind of a guided journal and workbook for women of color who've experienced workplace trauma. So, in my quest to find community and just better understand my experiences, I stumbled across her and that's where our paths crossed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did get the opportunity to go through the training session with her, really learning how to hold these safe space conversations for women who are kind of in the heat or the thick of these traumatic workplace experiences, giving them that opportunity to really talk through those situations, get advice, but also validation. Usually when we're going through these type of experiences, we do have people around us sometimes who just tell us to get over it, or
Mm-hmm.
everybody goes through something at work, or you have
Mm-hmm.
a good job, you should just be thankful and overlook those people. But it's not always that easy. And we know that being in those traumatic experiences, especially long term, has an effect on our mental and physical well being. So, again, just opening up the door for people to come in and have those conversations, share what's going on, does add some relief. And also gives them that source of community as they, look for ways to heal from those experiences if they're in the past, or find a way out.
Thank you for that. What you said, like several things that you said really stuck out to me. One of them was safe place. And it's because in my experience as a facilitator, as a trainer, I don't use that language anymore. Because in group settings, and particularly in workplaces, I just don't believe we can have that, right? Like I can't guarantee it, and I don't believe that we can have it. But I more recently um, tapped into this idea of a personal safe space, um, which is I think what you're talking about, and both in terms of like me, my own self, and what feels safe to me, but also in terms of intimate spaces with trusted people. And so one, I wanted to make just kind of that comment, and I know we're gonna go into safe spaces here in a second.
Sure.
Um, but secondly, you talked about the impact of dealing with this type of workplace trauma long term. And I was doing some research recently about the long term effects of essentially chronic stress on Black women specifically. So, studies have been done that show that Black women experience higher amounts of stress over longer periods of time than their white counterparts, which leads to the mental health issues, depression and anxiety, namely, were two of the things that they found, but also leads to physical health issues like high blood pressure and obesity. And for me, those all of those things, well, not I don't have high blood pressure, but the weight gain has been something that I have experienced and struggle with. Depression and anxiety are both mental health conditions that I struggle with. And when thinking about this article used the language of like Black women's involuntary relationship with stress,
Mm.
and that really resonated with me because when I'm thinking about just the random things that we go through that we don't even think to call trauma, traumatic, or stressful or hard, um, because we don't think to call it that. Me, I'll speak for myself because I don't think to call it that. I'm not even paying attention to how it affects these other areas of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm glad that you just mentioned, the whole reason for this season is like we need to pour into ourselves or else we will die. Like
Absolutely.
not get sick, not I don't know, lose a relationship.
Mhm.
We will die. Like that is the ultimate all the other stuff are like the precursor symptoms. But we have seen Black women taking their lives, and we have seen Black women literally dropping dead. We have seen Black women, like I personally know of Black women who have died in their sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it is that serious. And when we spend so much of our time at work, it is important that we deal with what's happening at work. So let's pause a minute and just get real. You do everything for everybody. But have you taken a moment to care for future you? Getting your affairs in order isn't just about wills or trusts, it's about peace of mind for you and love for those that you leave behind. Ideally, we should all have an estate plan. And if you're in Georgia, Wills for the People can help you out. But if you're not ready yet to create your will or trust, there's something that you can do that will go a long way in helping the future you. And that is to get organized. The I Plan for This Life Organizer for when it's needed is a workbook designed to help you organize your life with clarity and ease, making it so that if someone needs to care for you or for your affairs because you're not able to, they have all of the information that they need. No stress, no confusion, just a record made by you, about you. Visit willsforthepeoplega.com to get your copy, because you deserve to be prepared and to have your loved ones prepared. Again, that's willsforthepeoplega.com and click on the workbook tab. Back to the show. So that was a soapbox, but I'll give you a chance to respond.
No. Yeah, no, I agree with all that. And thank you for pointing out just kind of some definitions around safety, because identifying safe spaces is really a foundation and a key component to being able to heal from trauma. Because when we experience a traumatic event, that's one of the first things that is jeopardized is that feeling of safety. Fear, anxiety, all of those things are triggered, and we're not really able to heal until we're able to feel that sense of safety within ourselves. And so, like you said, part of that is really identifying our own personal sense of safety. What is safety to me? Who are the people that I personally feel safe around? And then finding community, be that in groups or, with individuals who can really support us in our own personal needs for safety.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, a lot of the things that we experience in the workplace as women of color, we sometimes normalize those events. And because we normalize those events or experiences, we don't realize the impact that it's having on us mentally, but also trauma is stored in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, this causes all types of health issues, high blood pressure, diabetes, anxiety. All of these things are happening within the body, and we just may be thinking these things are normal, or it's strictly because of our diet or something like that, not realizing that there are environmental factors in our workplaces that could be contributing to those issues as well. And like you said, the end of it all is death. There are many things that happen in between, and trauma, has an impact on our quality of life, but ultimately not healing from it and not addressing those things, the side effects, the health effects that take place because of not healing trauma, not addressing it, ultimately leads to death.
Yeah, thank you. I want to talk about safety, and we are not going to talk about like necessarily what trauma looks like at work, what a traumatic workplace looks like. For listeners, if you want to hear about that, all of the all of the episodes outside of this season talk about that. But my goal this season is to not talk about what happens at work. We are talking about what is happening outside of work and what is happening inside of ourselves in order to heal and in order to pour into ourselves. So go to past episodes. There are episodes on employment discrimination. There are episodes on bullying. There are episodes on toxic workplaces. Um, Go listen to those if you need help figuring out like it, are they talking about me? Like, is this? But I would like to talk about safety. Okay, and
Mhm.
so like I had said earlier, my role as a race equity educator, trainer, facilitator is that I come in to workplaces and teach about various aspects of race equity and racism and what it's got to do with our workplace. So there's always people who are like super gung ho for it. There are people that are like, I have to sit through another one of these. And then there are people who are like, this is some bullshit.
Mhm.
And when you're dealing with a mix of people who may or may not want to be there, it's not a safe place. And so I do not recommend, but people are going to say it's safe. People are going to say, we trust each other. We want the best, and we're not racist, and we're not homophobic, or we're not whatever. But if the space that you're entering, if not everybody wants to be there, and if not everybody has bought in, then it's not safe. So don't let them trick you, because
Absolutely.
I've been tricked and
Mm,
left the room crying, right? Like,
yeah.
I've been tricked and it doesn't feel good.
Mhm.
Um, so when we're talking about healing though, I what I am more and more realizing for myself is that it happens not necessarily in public. Because I don't necessarily trust that everybody there is there for the same reason that I'm there. And so I want to ask you about what what healing how am I going to say this? Like when you are facilitating a small group or when you are working with someone, what are you doing to create that safety? What is how or maybe how do people identify the safety?
Yeah, that is a really good question because, as we discussed, safety is one of the largest components to being able to heal from trauma. You cannot heal without first feeling safe. And so I agree with you. Everywhere that we go that's labeled safe is not safe. And so there's a vetting process that has to take place. Everybody cannot be trusted with your story and your feelings. And to
Mhm.
your point, trusting the wrong people and being vulnerable in front of the wrong people, you end up with hurt feelings, re-traumatizing yourself, and just really making things a lot worse for yourself. So there's a vetting process that has to take place before you open yourself up and, really gain that level of comfort to be vulnerable in front of others. And so one of the things that I had to learn to do is really learn to look for people that are trauma informed. And it's
Mm.
not necessarily everyone that is a therapist or everyone that holds a group and holds a safe space doesn't necessarily understand the interworkings of trauma, how it impacts people, how it affects how they show up in the world and present themselves. So, really making sure that we are opening ourselves up to people that understand trauma and what it is and the effect that it may be having on us in the moment. And then also, in our groups, like our safe spaces that I'm doing through as an Unbreak My Soul facilitator, there's a vetting process with the people that are able to come into the group as well. There's a brief questionnaire that they need to fill out. There's some ground
Mm.
rules that we have to cover and understand. Everyone's coming here for support and for validation. These are the things that you can or cannot say in the session so that you're not damaging to other people.
Mhm.
So, like I said, there's a bit of a vetting process that we have to do personally, but then also really trust that those spaces that we're entering into, that those facilitators or those professionals are doing that vetting as well to make sure that everyone in the group is kind of bought into those ground rules and facilitating a safe space and an environment where everyone can be comfortable.
Mm. So you created a 30-day healing guide. Um, I'm looking at one iteration, but I think it was an early iteration. So what you have now may not exactly match what I'm talking about. But what I'm looking at, the first week, so, 30 days, 4 weeks. The first week is on creating safety, acknowledging safety, seeing where your safety lies, creating the foundation of safety. And I love it. Okay, I love
Mhm.
it. The reason why I love it, so listeners know that over the course of this season, I've had just a number of divinely ordained moments. a number of, like, I am doing some healing that is only possible if a God exists,
Mhm.
because all of these random things are coming together. So, the story that I want to share is about my therapist telling me to identify a safe place, because my therapist, for the first time, I started doing EMDR, which is, I don't know, I guess jarring maybe for potentially potentially puts you in a place where you need some safety.
Correct.
Like
Yes. You
you
need a
need some
safe
tools.
space to go back to.
Exactly. And so before we got into EMDR, she tells me to we're doing a variety of things to build up my toolbox
Mhm.
for when I need grounding or safety or whatever. So she tells me to think about, a safe place. What might a safe place look like for me? Where do I, like, is there a place that exists on this planet that makes me feel safe? Um, are there characteristics of a space that make me feel safe? And, if I put all of those together, what am I envisioning, right?
Mhm.
So through this process, I started thinking about where physically in my house specifically, because that's where I'm at most of the time, do I feel the safest? Do I feel the securest? Do I feel the most comfortable that does not rely on other people? Because, like, snuggled up with my husband is like number one, but like I
Yeah.
can't always be snuggled up with my husband. He doesn't even like touch. So
Mhm.
that never happens, right? Uh, so, anyway, long story short, I found my safe space. It's on a specific bed that has a specific comforter that feels a
Mm.
certain type of way, blah de blah de blah. Okay. So,
Yeah.
the same time though that I'm going through this process, I'm reading through your healing guide and I'm learning about why safety matters from these two different angles. And in your guide, you talk about why it matters to create safe places for when we are going to be on a healing journey. And so I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about, like, why this matters, that we either have like a physical space, that we are able to take our brains to a mental space, or that
Mhm.
we have people, or practices that we are using, and that are safe for us. Why does that matter?
Yeah, part of that healing process really is learning to trust ourselves again. And with the impacts that trauma causes on the body, we don't feel safe even within our own skin, our own body, oftentimes. And so it is important to be able to resource and identify those times in our life where we have felt safe, because trauma and being in an active trauma response is telling us that no matter where we go, what we do, we're not safe. And so we have to be able to channel back to those moments and times and those places where we did actually feel safe. And it's more about being able to capture that moment and those feelings and bring them with us along the way
Mhm,
throughout our healing journey. So like you said, your therapist had you identify, what does safety look like to you, because it's different for everybody.
mhm,
What are the places, what are the people, what are the sounds and smells, what are all those sensations that come together for you when you feel safe?
mhm,
And then, like I said, those experiences, those emotions, all of those things are kind of an anchor that hold us and carry us through our healing journey, because the emotions, the feelings, they do get deep, going back and revisiting some of those experiences. And so when things get too hard, we do need to be able to go back to that resource and that foundation of safety to really be able to stabilize ourselves.
mm. I'm thinking as you were talking just about my own workplace trauma specifically, and I know that, like, the safe space that I have now is not relating to work, but I also know that the safe space that I have now is like a direct response to the lack of safety that I felt at a time in my life. Like, it's the inverse. I was in a cold room, there was nothing soft, I was all by
Yeah.
myself, you know? So my safe place is basically the comfiest thing you can find in my
Right.
house. Um, and so I'm just thinking about work and, like, some of the ways that I have felt or experienced trauma or toxicity, and, like, I think for me, this is where community does come in. Like, I am someone that my safe space has been in a small, tight knit community of people where I know that I am believed.
Yes.
And so, because I think a big part of the trauma for me has been gaslighting, saying or explaining what I am experiencing or seeing, and then being told that I'm not actually
Mhm.
experiencing or seeing that thing. And so being with people who are affirming and just believing, you could believe, I could say the sky is purple and they would believe me. And like for me, that's a safe place, because it, I think, heals some of the mm, insecurity or the the not being sure. It's that feeling that I think really impacted me with being gaslit is like, am
Mhm.
I making this up? Like, am I? It's the not trusting self, like you said.
Yeah, no, and that is a really important point, and I'm glad you brought that up because embracing community is another part of healing. We can't heal in isolation. We are social creatures ultimately, and so we need that co-regulation from others. Like you said, we need that validation and support from other people in order to be able to heal, and especially after a traumatic event, because those events do make us question our own reality, our own judgment. They affect our confidence and our ability just to move through the world on our own. And oftentimes it is only through going to others who may be more resilient or stronger in the moment that we're able to regain and build those things for ourselves. So having that community is so extremely important. And as we discussed earlier, the biggest thing is just finding community in the right places. It
Yes.
may not always be in the workplace or, with the close group of friends that we've known our whole lives, the places where we want it to be. But we do have to seek out community because we cannot heal alone.
Mm,
In the early stages of our healing journey, spending some time alone is actually good. Because a lot of times, as we talked about, safety kind of skews our sense of self. And so you may need to get in contact with your values again and who you really are, what's important to you, why you do the things that you do. And so spending some time alone will kind of help you channel those feelings and get back in contact with
mm,
yourself. But then the bigger piece of it is now we have to get back in contact with society.
mhm.
None of us can just operate alone
Yeah.
as much as we'd like to. I mean, you can DoorDash, you can Instacart. It's a lot of stuff that you can do all by yourself in isolation. But to have the best quality of life, we are meant to be social creatures and we have to interact with others. And so we do have to get back out into society. And so finding the right community to be a part of is really essential in that healing process.
It reminds me of, like, how I need somebody in my life to be able to call me on my BS, right? Like, I also need somebody in my life, could be the same person, could not be the same person, could be
Mhm.
multiple people, could be people that I pay, but people who will say, you know, "Yes, Whitney, the sky is purple. I can see how you see that the sky is purple."
Yep.
And there are people. I met with somebody yesterday for lunch. Great lunch. She has been in the city that I live in for 10 years, but hasn't built any real relationships.
Mhm.
Because who knows? Anyways, hasn't built any real relationships. She says that she knows people, but she doesn't say that they're friends necessarily. And I think
Mhm.
I used to be like that. And she's finding, like, there's a deficit. Like, that's not, she knows that she wants to have, like, friends in the way of, being able to relate not only on my experiences outside of the workplace, but also on the experiences inside of the workplace as well. And, for me, that has been so important. I remember a day where I left work crying, and the first person that I called it was not my spouse. It was not a person that had been in the workplace with me. But it was someone who teaches about this as well.
Mhm.
And who I knew that if I called and explained my side of the story, I don't need to explain their side of the story.
Yep.
Let me explain my side of the story. That what I would, receive would be empathy, would be anger, would be, the things that would validate me. So
Mhm.
I say all this to say that if you do not have that person or people in your life, um, I agree with Dominique that, like, we need that for healing, because otherwise it's just ourselves in our heads going back and forth about whether or not we were justified in whatever we said or did, or whether or not the other person was justified in gaslighting us, or maybe we didn't actually see or feel what we thought we felt.
Yeah.
That is not, for me, that's an anxiety spiral.
Absolutely. Yeah. In that traumatized state, we're not even really in a place where we can decipher maybe what's real and what's not.
Mm,
And so we really do need the support of other people, the perspective of other
mm,
people to kind of add a different lens to what we've been facing, and like you said, really offer that support. And if we don't have it, that is part of the reason why I created this journal, because sometimes, the only person that we may have initially is ourselves, but also opening ourselves up to prayer,
mm,
and just being open to the experience that, maybe there's a power bigger than us, someone greater than us that we can give these things to, until we're able to kind of build that community of other, physical people around us to really give us the support that we need. But it is impossible to heal without it. And to your point of your friend, that is one of the scariest things sometimes after you've been through a traumatic experience, is opening yourself up to people again, because it's probably people that hurt you in the first place. And it's like, why would I put myself back out here again only to be hurt? But there's so much hurt and pain that comes with not being able to experience that social connection and have that need met. That, for most of us, it'll push us to open up, even if it's just to one person, like you said, even a paid professional, just someone that we can trust in that moment. I know for me, that was one of the things that I did. I found that a lot of my friends, although well meaning, really weren't people that I could have this conversation with. They felt like, you're over it, you're out of that situation. Why is it still bothering you? Why are you still talking about
or
those
you're so
people?
sensitive, or yeah, you tripping,
Absolutely.
basically.
Yes, yes. Just get over it and move on. You're doing good. Why are you worried about those people? Not realizing that those experiences had such a deep effect on me.
Mhm.
And so it was only when I enlisted the help of a coach. And I remember my first few sessions, I just spit out everything, rattled on and on and on about everything that had happened for the past X number of years. And he just sat and listened and nodded his head. And I just needed somebody to do that. It was something that I had never gotten, is really having that empathetic, sympathetic listener without people invalidating what had happened to me.
Right, or trying
Um,
to, like, break it down, or, like, well, maybe they responded this way because, like, no. Uh-uh.
right.
It's all about me and my perspective, and this is what like, and
Yes.
setting aside, like, right and wrong about that. Like, maybe this is something that I am wrong about,
Mhm.
that I did, like, I created this situation. Okay, that's fine, but I'll work through that later. Because right now,
Absolutely.
what I need is for you to say the sky is purple.
Absolutely. And so often, even if we are at fault, it doesn't excuse the behavior of the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes people miss that. I know I had a lot of people tell me, well, you should try to understand what you could have done to make the situation better. I am all for being an adult and, acknowledging any shortcomings or things like that in the process. But one thing doesn't make the other okay. And so we really have to approach that healing journey with a certain level of compassion for ourselves and not take away from the fact that we were victimized and hurt in some way, even if maybe we contributed to it, in some small way, shape, or form. It doesn't really excuse the actions of the people who caused the harm.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody is really in a space where they're able to understand that nuance. And so a lot of times it is better to maybe have those conversations with a professional or maybe someone that we're not as close to that doesn't understand the full story so that they're coming to the situation with a more open mind, and less
Mm-hmm.
judgment or understanding of who they think we are and what
Mm-hmm.
happened in those scenarios.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because I'm just thinking like being a person who is being sought out for support, whether that's because I'm a friend or whether that's because I'm a professional and they're paying me to do this. Well, if I'm a professional, then usually I'm gonna know like what it is that you need. But if
Mhm.
I'm a friend, I'm not always gonna know whether or not you need the friend that's like, pick yourself up, put on them
Right.
big girl panties, or
Hmm.
if I need the friend that's going to validate me. And so I'm glad that you said what you said because it's not that you have gone through something, you go to a friend and that friend says, get over it out of like, spite or like, they're not trying to be bad on you or a bad friend or whatever. It's just that sometimes we just need different responses. And so, to the extent that we can communicate, like, I was obviously crying when I called my friend Milo. Shout out to Milo. I was crying. So, like, Milo wasn't going to say, stop crying, get over it, go
Mhm.
back to work.
Right.
Um, but, that does happen, and that's okay. That doesn't mean anything, about necessarily that friendship. That doesn't mean that they're not your friend. It just means
Absolutely.
that's not the friend that you need to talk to right now. You need to go find another
Absolutely.
friend, maybe work on communication. Is there like a safe word, that you could say where it's like, I'm
Mhm.
calling you bananas, and so now bananas means I need you to not tell me that I'm wrong. I need
Right.
banana means the sky's purple, okay?
Yeah.
Um, and so I just think, also as a friend who may be receiving another friend in distress, um, for me, it can be tricky to know, like, what is it that you need? And so sometimes just asking, like, what is
Absolutely.
it that you need from me? Do you just need space? Do you need, because I want to solve somebody's problems.
Mhm.
So, like, I need you to tell me if you don't want your problem solved because otherwise you face a problem, I'm gonna start brainstorming. Um
Yeah, and when we are in those situations with other people and we're trying to help, we often don't realize that us trying to solve and fix the problem for them could be traumatizing within itself because they've already experienced this event where they didn't have any control over the outcome and what happened to them. So that sense of autonomy has already been affected. Now they're coming to us with the problem, trying to talk through it, trying to get some support. And we're like, look, do this, this, and this, and you're fixed.
Yeah.
And that may not even be the solution for them, So we have to trust that everybody has the keys, to their own healing, and
Mhm.
it's within them. And we really have to allow people the space and time to kind of talk through it and work through it and kind of figure it out themselves. And to your point, that's not going to be with everyone that is a friend, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you will learn early on who you should have those conversations with and who you shouldn't. I know I've put myself in a few situations with people going home crying in an Uber driver looking at me like I'm crazy, like, what is wrong with you? But I learned, okay, never have that conversation with that person again because they don't get it. And that's also kind of where boundaries come in. And as you mentioned, really being able to communicate what our needs are. Sometimes people just don't know, you
Yeah.
know, like no one wants to be a bad friend. And so a lot of times when we let people know what we need, look, I don't need you to solve this for me. I really just need to talk to you about this situation and I need you to try to understand. And after communicating that to people a few times, you'll determine if there's someone that's capable of holding that space for you. And if they're not, don't necessarily hold it against them, but you just know that this is not the person that you need to keep going back to only to put yourself in these harmful situations. I think, especially early on in the healing journey, you know, we're really fragile.
Mm-hmm.
And so going to the wrong people and having those repeated negative experiences is only going to deepen that trauma wound. So we really have to kind of follow through that vetting
Mm-hmm.
process
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. Like you said, communicate our needs, let people know what we need and what we want, create those boundaries. And if we're finding that people are not going along with it, you know, maybe leave those people alone for a little while or, you know, find other ways to have a relationship with them outside of discussing these type of issues with them.
Yeah. So I want to transition to talk about writing, journaling, and
Your
even looking
favorite.
at this word makes me ugh. So maybe like because even the 30-day healing guide. So I received that with that as the title. And
Hmm.
that I feel like I like guides. I like
Hmm.
worksheets and questionnaires. I don't mind those at all. But journaling, I mind. So
Yep.
so I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should just do more like of the quote guided journals, but like cross out journal and just say guided.
Hmm.
I don't know, guide.
Yes.
Um, but at any rate, so you created this, and you know, I love it's like just a series of prompts, really.
Hmm.
And it's meant to get you thinking about you know obviously what's going on with you. We talked about you know the first week of this journal is reflection around safety, and then at the end, so you kind of have a variety of different instructions within this guide, and one of your instructions is like at the end of the week, go back and read what you wrote and like notice basically. Can you talk about that and give some maybe tips or thoughts on getting started with this type of processing, why writing might be helpful as opposed to like I'm a talker, so as opposed to talking. And like what how can people get started?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I did actually end up changing the name of it to a guide,
Nice.
not
Nice.
a journal for many of the reasons
Mhm.
that you just mentioned. I know that even the word journal can be triggering for some people. Some people just don't enjoy writing. And to be honest, that was one of the things that was suggested to me by my coach when I was kind of starting on this journey myself. And I had the same reaction. Okay.
It just feels like work. This is homework that I
It
do not want
does.
to I don't want to do trauma homework. Like who
No,
wants to does anyone want to do this?
I don't think so. And so I was very resistant to it, to be honest, at least the first few weeks. And he just kept giving me the assignment. Did you do your journaling? Yeah, I did it. I spent 10 minutes and I wrote about this or that. And he's like, okay, good. He didn't really press the issue. But I noticed over the weeks as I went back to look at some of the things that I was writing, I was sharing a lot of feelings and emotions and just things that I had personally never really connected with.
Mm,
A lot of thoughts and things that were swirling around in my head, but I wasn't really able to take action on or even understand because they weren't written down. They pop up in my head for a minute and I would dismiss it or whatever. So, really being able to go back to those thoughts and those feelings and kind of see that maybe the root causes of certain things that were going on with me it was a really powerful moment. And so I'm like, I wonder what would happen if I actually did my homework every week and just took 15 minutes or so to journal and just be honest with myself. And I think that that is one of the things that is sometimes scary about journaling because you don't quite know what's going to come out. But we can't heal the things that we don't address. And so if we keep everything in our head and locked away and we're not acknowledging it, then we'll never reach that point of healing. So
mm,
I really like journaling for that reason. And I've kind of adopted it now as something that is self care for me.
mhm,
Having those moments at the end of the day or maybe in the morning, whatever feels most comfortable for you to really just sit down and be with your own thoughts and give yourself that investment of listening and learning and understanding what's going on with you is something, again, that is really powerful. And I think in our world today, and especially when we've been impacted by trauma, we're so busy focusing on the danger and, people and things around us that we forget about us in the process.
mhm,
And so being able to journal is really just a way to pour into yourself and to get in contact with those feelings, emotions, and thoughts that you may not even know exist because you're not really taking the time to build that connection.
yeah. I think as well, the perspective that I get from then reading, um, and lesbian, I don't read my stuff often. Like, I, in fact, have found immense, like, use out of reading, like, old journals.
Mhm.
Um, but what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that getting outside of, like, writing can serve the purpose of getting outside of my head for me.
Yeah.
And when it gets outside of my head, then I am less subject to my own thoughts and ideas about this thing. I
Yeah.
don't know why, because now I'm the person reading it and I'm still the same person, right? But like for some reason, it's like, okay, it's like saying things out loud, right? Like
Yes.
this sounds great in my head until I say it out loud. And now it sounds like the stupidest thing I've ever thought.
Yep.
And I think that, for me, I do get that through having a conversation.
Mhm.
But I do see how I have benefited from also writing, and getting that same kind of reality check, really. And whether that be in the okay, Whitney, you doing too much, or even the wow, this makes sense now. This makes
Mhm.
sense like what I just wrote and now seeing it like, linearly because I might also like draw a picture or draw like a map or I don't know, do something with graphics. I can see that it is information, the same information that is packaged differently that for some
Yeah.
reason allows me to think about it differently.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And that's kind of been my experience as well with journaling. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. And you could use the journal prompts to really just have a conversation with yourself because that's really what the journaling is ultimately is a conversation with you, understanding your feelings and your processing and how you felt in a moment or what have you. And so some people have you know journals where maybe they're just talking into a microphone. They
Mhm,
read a journal
mhm,
prompt and they really start to have that conversation with themselves on safety and what that means. And it's a recorded conversation that just like if it's written, you can go back to later on and really be able to reflect and see what things about yourself you can unearth. So if it's just the writing, there is a lot of research done on just the connection between, our feelings and emotions and really being able to write them out. But if you don't like to write, you got carpal tunnel, whatever the situation is, there's other ways to do it. But I think the important thing is that we're asking ourselves those questions and we're giving ourselves the opportunity to really invest and understand how we feel. That's the most important thing, is just getting in contact and in connection with ourselves.
Yeah. Mm. Well, thank you, so much for this conversation and just for that perspective. I think, talking more about what is happening when we are trying to process and heal from workplace trauma. I'm hoping, for me, it's hitting, right? Like, I like this conversation. So I'm hoping that for folks who are listening, something resonated with you. Um, I would love to ask you, Dominique, where can we find your guide,
Yes.
and learn more about your work?
Yeah, no, so I have finished the guide, so I will provide you a copy of it so you can share it with listeners today.
Awesome.
But I do also have a website that I'll provide you as well, so people can go and download the guide. I'm offering it completely free of charge right now because, I understand the times that we're living in, and all of us needs some healing and support in that journey. So the guide is free of charge. It's no longer a journal; it's a guide. Free of charge to everyone. And so, like I said, I will provide that so you can share it with anyone that is listening today. But people can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a lot there about trauma, some of my own experiences, and even going into, advice and strategy on how to find a job, after you've been in a traumatic workplace, and what the
Mhm.
job search looks like after that, and how do you answer some of those difficult questions as you go through that journey. So definitely look me up on LinkedIn, and more than happy to help support people in any way possible.
Awesome. I so my stepbrother was just fired from the federal government,
Mhm.
like so many
Mhm.
other people. And in these weeks leading up to his department being downsized, um, he's been sharing with me a little bit about what that life is like. And I know probably all of us, if we aren't going through it, we know someone who is. And when talking about workplace trauma, like, I just think it would be remiss to not talk about the trauma that folks who are impacted by the federal government layoffs,
Absolutely.
like what you all are dealing with, because I can't imagine every day wondering whether or not today is the day that I'm being laid off, not being able, being censored at work, not really knowing what I'm supposed to be doing at work, but then being asked to
Mhm.
report on what I'm doing at work,
Yep.
um, and then ultimately, like, being laid off. And so I hope that, like, if there are people listening to this, and I said I wasn't going to talk about like examples of workplace trauma, but like that counts. So
Absolutely. And it's on display in front of
Mhm,
the entire world. It's not just like a little thing that's happening between you and your manager. This is something that the whole world is looking in on and seeing the mass layoffs and people being affected by it, and the treatment, the tweets, and,
mm,
all of the messages that are coming from higher ups in those situations, which is traumatizing within itself. And then, a lot of times when people are laid off, there's a lot of shame that comes with that. As we talked about earlier, kind of blaming yourself or questioning your reality. Well, maybe I did do something wrong. Maybe I could have did it better. And, I wouldn't have been in the group that got laid off, or what have you. So there's a lot of people right now that are just in this space of uncertainty and really trying to figure things out. And that is where building that foundation of safety and really getting back in contact with ourselves is so important. I know I posted about that yesterday actually on
oh,
LinkedIn
good.
because, everything around us is so uncertain. the only thing that we really can rely on is who we are, our own authenticity and, showing up in the world as who we really are. And, a lot of times we put so much into the work that we do and the place that we work at to really form our identity, that when those pieces are taken away from us, we fall apart because we have nothing else to rely on. So, that would be one of my messages to people, is that in this time of uncertainty, go back to you.
Mm,
Start to invest in getting to know you, reevaluate what your values are, what your purpose is, and really build your life off of those things. And it won't matter exactly where you're working at, what your title is, or any of that. You're going to have that continual sense of fulfillment, as long as you are living in alignment with your values and the things that are important to you.
mm.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Can you just give us your website address so that folks can go find you?
Yes. So I have my own coaching practice, True North Solutions. So obviously, finding your true north, whatever
Mhm.
that is. But people can find me at truenorthsolutions.com. I list some of my coaching offerings up there. I will also be adding the link for people to be able to download the guide to healing, amongst other resources that they need, and to be able to connect and reach out to me personally if they do need one-on-one, or maybe some group and community coaching as they go through the healing process.
Thank you. And for folks who are subscribers of the Validating Voice newsletter, you will also get the link to that guide. And I think that you will really like it. Like, whether or not you're a journaler, I do recommend you opening it up and just like reading through
Yeah.
it, because it gives you a lot to think about. Thank you so much for your time today, Dominique. Before we let out, sound like I'm at school. Before we close, I promised my son I would give him a shout out. So, hey Everett, this is your
Hey,
shout
Everett.
out. Right. And then I also wanted to shout out two supporters of the show, Sasha Bentley and my dad, Ron Knox,
Mm,
who recently gave significant donations to Impostrix Podcast to help us continue with this season, but also hopefully bring back Impostrix Podcast for a season 5. So thank you to Sasha and to my dad. If you are listening to the show and you want to contribute and be a supporter of Impostrix Podcast, please, please, please go to my website, www.impostrixpodcast.com. You will see a tab that says support. Please click on that tab, and you've got a variety of options for how you can support. All right. Thank you for this show, Dominique.
Thank you so much, Whitney, and thank you for holding space for this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Impostrix Podcast. I hope that you got what you needed. If you're ready for more, feel free to go through the other 3 seasons worth of amazing episodes that we've put together for you. I want to hear from you. I want to know how you related to this episode. So if you're listening on Spotify, feel free to answer the question or send a text. You can do that through your Spotify app. If you're listening elsewhere, make sure that you follow me on Instagram at Impostrix Podcast. And if you like to text, go ahead, go to the show notes, look for the link for the WhatsApp community, because we just got it started this season for season 4, and I love to chat, so hit me up. Also, thank you to Chris at Digital REM for editing this episode. Until next time, be validated.